Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the continuation of my book reading of Stephen King's Cell. Come to a new chapter. Finally, it's been a long journey till now, but we finally come to a new chapter called Malden. So here we go. Thousands of people stood on the Mystic River Bridge and watched as everything between Calm Avenue and Boston Harbor took fire and burned. The wind from the west remained brisk and warm, even after the sun was down, and the flames roared like a furnace, blotting out the stars. The rising moon was full and ultimately hideous. Sometimes the smoke masked it, but all too often that bulging dragon's eye swam free and peered down, casting a bleary orange light. Clay thought it a horror comic moon, but didn't say so. No one had much to say. The people on the bridge only looked at the city they had so lately left, watching as the flames reached the pricey harborfront condos and began engulfing them. From across the water came an interwoven tapestry of alarms, fire alarms, car alarms, mostly with several whooping sirens added for spice. For a while, an amplified voice has told citizens to get out of the streets, and then another had begun advising them to leave the city on foot by major arteries west and north. These two contradictory pieces of advice had competed with each other for several minutes, and then get off the streets had ceased. About 5 minutes later, leave the city on foot had also quieted. Now there was only the hungry roar of the wind-driven fire, the alarms, and the steady low crumping sound that Clay thought must be windows imploding in the enormous heat. He wondered how many people had been trapped over there, trapped between the fire and the water. Remember wondering if a modern city could burn. Tom McCord said, in the light of the fire, his small, intelligent face looked tired and sick. There was a smudge of ash on one of his cheeks. Remember that? Shut up, come on, Alice said. She was clearly distraught, but like Tom, she spoke in a low voice. It's like we're in a library, Clay thought. And then he thought, no, a funeral home. Can we please go? Because this is kicking my ass. Sure, Clay said. You bet. How far to your place, Tom? From here? Well, less than 2 miles, he said. But it's not all behind us, I'm sorry to say. They had turned north now, and he pointed ahead and to the right. The glow blooming there could almost have been orange tinted. Arc sodium streetlights on a cloudy night. Except the night was clear, and the streetlights were now out. In any case, streetlights did not give off rising columns of smoke. Alice moaned, then covered her mouth, as she expected someone among the silent multitude watching Boston burn might reprimand her for making too much noise. Don't worry, Tom said with eerie calm. We're going to Malden, and that looks like reverie. The wind's blowing. Malden should still be alright. Stop right there, Clay urged him silently, but Tom did not. For now, he added. There were several dozen abandoned cars on the lower deck on the span, and a fire truck with East Boston lettered on its avocado green side that had been sideswiped by a cement truck. Both were abandoned. But mostly this level of the bridge belonged to the pedestrians. Except now, you probably have to call them refugees, Clay thought. And then he realized there was no them about it. Us. Call us refugees. There was still very little talk. Most people just stood and watched the city burn in silence. Those were moving went slowly, looking back frequently over their shoulders. Then, As they neared the far end of the bridge, he could see old Ironsides, at least he thought it was old Ironsides, riding at anchor in the harbor, still safe from the flames. He noticed an odd thing. Many of them were also looking at Alice. At first, he had a paranoid idea that people must think he and Tom had abducted the girl and were spiriting her away from God knew what immortal purposes. Then he had to remind himself that these rats of the Mystic Bridge were in shock, even more uprooted from their normal lives than the Hurricane Katrina refugees had been. Those unfortunates had at least had some warning, and were unlikely to be capable of considering such fine ideas. Most were too deep in their own heads for moralizing. Then the moon rose a little higher and came out a little more strongly, and he got it. He was the only adolescent in sight. Even Clay himself was young compared to most of their fellow refugees, the majority of people gnawing at the torch that had been Boston or plodding slowly towards Malden and Danvers were over 40, and many looked eligible for the golden age-year discount at Denny's. He saw a few people with little kids and a couple of babies in strollers, but that was pretty much it for the younger set. A little farther on, he noticed something else. There were cell phones lying discarded in the roadway. Every few feet, they passed another one, and none was whole. They had either been run over or stomped down to nothing but wire and splinters of plastic, like dangerous snakes that had been destroyed before they could bite again. "What's your name, dear?" asked a plump woman who came angling across their side of the highway. This was about 5 minutes after they had left the bridge. Tom said another 15 would bring them to the Salem Street exit, and from there it's only 4 blocks to his house. She said this cat would be awfully glad to see him. His cat would be awfully glad to see him. And that had brought a one smile to Alice's face. Clay thought one was better than nothing. Now Alice looked with reflective mistrust at the plump woman, who had detached herself from the mostly silent group and little lines of men and women, hardly more than shadows really. Some with suitcases, some carrying shopping bags and wearing backpacks, that had crossed the Mystic and were walking north on Route 1, away from the Great Fire to the south, and all too aware of the new one taking hold in Wivery, off to the northeast. The plump woman looked back at her with sweet interest. Her graying hair was done in neat beauty shop curls. She wore cat eyes, glasses, and what Clay's mother would have called a car coat. She carried a shopping bag in one hand and a book in the other. There seemed to be no harm in her. She certainly wasn't one of the phone crazies. They hadn't seen a single one in those since leaving the Atlantic Avenue Inn with their sacks of grub. But Clay felt himself go on point just the same. To be approached as if they were at a get-acquainted tea instead of fleeing a burning city didn't seem normal. But under these circumstances, just what was. He was probably losing it, but if so, Tom was too. He was also watching the plump, motherly woman with go-away eyes. "Alice?" Alice said at last, just when Clay had decided the girl wasn't going to reply at all. She sounded like a kid trying to answer what she fears may be a trick question in a class that's really too tough for her. "My name is Alice Maxwell." "Alice," the plump woman says, and her lips curved in a maternal smile, as sweet as her look of interest. I have no idea what that word is. My apologies. There was no reason that smile should have set Clay on edge more than he already was. But I did. That's a lovely name. It means blessed of God. Actually, ma'am, it means of the royalty. Or regularly born, Tom said. Now, could you excuse us? The girl had just lost her mother today, and we've all lost someone today, haven't we, Alice? The plump woman said without looking at Tom. She kept pace with Alice, her beauty shop curls bouncing with every step. Alice was eyeing her with a mixture of unease and fascination. Around them, others paced and sometimes hurried, and often plodded with their heads down, likely more than rats in this unaccustomed darkness. And Clay still saw nobody young except for a few babies, a few toddlers, and Alice. 2 adolescents, because most adolescents had cell phones. Like Pixie Light back at the Mr. Softy truck, or like his own son, who had a red Nextel with a ringtone from the Monster Club, and a teacher, worker mommy, who might be with him, or might be just about any... Stop it. Don't you let that rat out. That rat can do nothing but run, bite, and chase his own tail. The plump woman meanwhile kept nodding, her curls bouncing along. Yes, we've all lost someone, because this is the time of the Great Tribulation. It's all in here in Revelation. She held up the book she was carrying, and of course it was a Bible, and now Clay thought he was getting a better look at the sparkle in the eyes behind the plump woman's cat-eyed glasses. That wasn't kindly interest. That was lunacy. Oh, that's it. Everybody out of the pool, Tom said. In his voice, Clay heard a mixture of disgust at himself for letting the plump woman bore in and get close to begin with, quite likely, and dismay. The plump woman took no notice, of course. She had fixed Alice with her stare and was there to pull her away. The police were otherwise occupied, if there were any left. Here there were only the shocked and shuffling refugees, and they could care less about one elderly crazy lady with a Bible and a beauty shop perm. The vial of insanity had poured into the brains of the wicked, and the city of sin had been set afire by the cleansing torch of Yehoyah. The plump lady cried. She was wearing red lipstick. Her teeth were too even to be anything but old-fashioned dentures. Now you see the unrepentant flee. Yeah, verily, even as maggots flee the burst belly of... Alice put her hands over her ears. Make her stop, she cried, and still the ghost shape of the city's recent resident filed past, only a few sparring. A dull, incurious glance before looking once more into the darkness where somewhere ahead New Hampshire lay. The plump woman was starting to work up a sweat, Bible raised, eyes blazing, beauty shop curls nodding and swaying. Take your hands down, girl, and hear the word of God before you let these men lead you away and fornicate with you in the open doorway of hell itself. For I saw a star blaze in the sky, and it was called wormwood, and those that followed it followed upon Lucifer, and those that followed upon Lucifer walked downwards into the furnace of... Clay hit her. That was interesting the way I said that. The furnace of... Clay hit her. Anyway, he pulled the punch at the last second, but it was still a solid clip to the jaw, and he felt the impact travel all the way up to his shoulder. The plump woman's glasses rolled off her pug nose and then settled back. Behind them her eyes lost their glare and rolled up in their sockets. Her knees came unhinged and she buckled. Her Bible tumbled from her clenched fist. Alice, still looking stunned and horrified, nevertheless dropped her hands from her ears fast enough to catch the Bible. And Tom McCourt caught the woman under her arms. The punch and the two subsequent catches were so neatly done they could have been choreographed. Clay was suddenly closer to undone than any time since things had started going wrong. Why this should have been worse than the throat-biting teenage girl or the knife-wielding businessman, worse than finding Mr. Riccardi hanging from a light fixture with a bag over his head. He didn't know, but it was. He had kicked the knife-wielding businessman. Tom had too, but the knife-wielding businessman had been a different kind of crazy. The old lady with the beauty shop curls had just been, Jesus, she said, she was just a nut. And I cold cocked her. She was starting to shake. Well, he was starting to shake. She was terrorizing a young girl who had lost her mother today, Tom said, and Clay realized it wasn't calmness he heard in the small man's voice, but an extraordinary coldness. You did exactly the right thing. Besides, you can't keep an old iron horse like this down for long. She's coming around already. Help me get her on her side of the road. I'll get her over to the side of the road. And with this, I'm going to stop it here for this book reading. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.